Welcome to the 10x methodology video. Let's get started. So by now you've already seen the 10x introductory video, the exercise physiology principles video, the 5 strategies that make 10x work the way that it does. This is the 10x methodology video, which is going to prepare you for helping you build your own 10x routine. Now, if you haven't seen any of those videos, I highly recommend that you go back, watch those videos, because they will give you a foundational understanding of the methodology itself and why we build it the way that we do. Moving on, so the 10x methodology is comprised of 6 elements, and starting with the exercises, which are the fundamental building blocks of your exercise program, as it's the same for all exercise programs, as you can imagine. So we will discuss the different types of exercises, the number of exercises that your program may or may not include. A 10x set is basically how each of those exercises that you select is executed. So there's a very particular strategy of how you execute an exercise, which is discussed in the exercise strategy video. Then we move on to the 10x circuits, which is the structural units of a routine. There are only 2 circuits per routine for every 10x routine. The reason I make 10x circuits its own category, so you can see its basic building blocks of how routines are put together. And then we move on to the different types of 10x programs that you can select. There really are only 2 because they help you. They help people to sort of meet most of their needs. And then we will move on to the 10x progression. Which variables can we modify to make the exercise stimulus increasingly more difficult and challenging so you can continuously improve. And again, I do spend a lot of time talking about progression in the 10x strategies video. So again, go back and watch those videos if you haven't done so already. So let's get started. All right, so as I said, 10x is made up of 6 elements. Let me give you a short introduction to each before we go really deep into each of them. So firstly, the 10x exercises are where essentially think of your program. Every time you do a workout, it will be 6 exercises. Each exercise will last for at least 1 minute, where we do 12 repetitions per exercise, lasting 1 minute, and we do that for 6 exercises. Okay. Each of those exercises are executed based on our 10x strategy, based on the 5 strategies that we talked about: targeted muscle failure, sequential recruitment, accentuated negatives. And so those are really the key strategies that we, let's say, implement in every exercise. 10x circuit, every circuit is made up of 3 exercises, it's almost like people are familiar with supersets. So superset is when you do 2 exercises in quick succession. So you move from, let's say, a push-up to a pull-up quickly. That's quite popular. So think of a circuit as a superset, but with 3 exercises. Okay. 10x routines are then 2 circuits for every routine. So think of a circuit as an exercise dose, and you'll see what I mean by that exactly. And then we move on to the 10x programs. Every 10x program, 10x program is defined based on frequency. So how many times you will train per week, either once or twice. And I basically help you decide which you should do. And then 10x progression is where I teach you how to scale an exercise and the load or difficulty or weight of an exercise to make it increasingly more challenging for you so you can always improve. And so let's get started. Okay, so what are the 10x exercises? So first of all, a 10x exercise can be defined as an exercise that is full range, right? And it's a very simple unidirectional movement in usually a stabilized position. Now, stabilized is important because when I say stabilized, either you have enough strength and integrity to keep your body in a very stabilized position without support. Most people aren't strong enough, conditioned enough to actually support themselves in a certain exercise position to the degree that they should to get the same stimulus, right? So that's why I say stabilized Unidirectional, obviously it's dynamic, it's not a static movement, because many exercises can be done as an isometric type exercise where you're pushing as hard as you can, but there's no movement that's occurring. So it would be static instead of dynamic. Obviously we're doing a full range, we're not doing half ranges, although sometimes we even do half ranges. And then these are obviously high resistance movements, meaning that they're quite heavy, quite intense. Okay, now we have three primary types of movements. And so the first is what we call alpha movements. Alpha are your primary, very powerful, large muscle group movements. And I'll give you a quick sense of what they look like in a bit. Then we have our beta exercises. These are our secondary movements where they target more smaller muscle groups, smaller, let's say, compared to the larger muscle groups. Then we have gamma exercises. And they are, again, tertiary, supportive, small muscle group movements. Now, remember, alpha exercise, all of your 10x routines are made up of alpha, beta. You have alpha, beta, and gamma routines, but please remember, all of your routines are, or let's say, your beta and your gamma exercises, your beta and your gamma routines are all optional. They are not mandatory. You don't have to actually include them in the program. They are there when you want to, for those who feel they need to work on additional muscle groups if they either if they have some kind of imbalance, or if they feel like they really would like to work on those areas for one or another reason. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like. Now again, alpha, these images beautifully display more or less that every alpha exercise will target more or one or more major muscle groups, like you can see here. So if I was to do a pull-up, you can see mainly I'm targeting my back, my chest is a little bit involved, shoulders are involved, my upper limbs are involved. Okay, so it's an entire upper body movement. If I was to do a, let's say, back exercise like a pull-up. Beta exercise, you can see this would be if I were to do, for example, a bicep curl. You can see then mostly I'm only working my biceps and my forearms. And with the gamma exercises, for instance, this would be an example of a neck exercise. And believe it or not, but there is great utility in doing neck exercises, wrist exercises, thoracic exercises to really get at these really hard to reach, sometimes underexpressed muscles and muscle groups. And so gamma exercises allow us to target those. But again, beta and gamma are optional. So here are the actual exercises. You have 8 alpha exercises, 6 beta, and 5 gamma complex movements. So they are hinge, squat, lunge, pull, row, push, dip, press. For the beta, we have back extension, leg raise, bicep curl, tricep extension, hip thrust, and a calf raise. And I'll show you in a moment which muscle groups each of these exercises target. Then the gamma exercises are, again, as I referred to it earlier, these are the tertiary supportive exercises that target micro or small muscle groups like the neck, scapula, thoracic, wrist, and hip. Okay, let me show you what they look like. So starting with the alpha exercises, we have lower body, upper body, upper body. So we start with a hinge because a hinge movement, which I'll show you what it looks like in just a second, targets the entire, so whenever you hear posterior chain, a chain means that all the movement, all the exercises that usually work together are being activated, and posterior means behind. So when I'm, let's say, lifting an exercise off the floor, the entire chain of muscles from the back is being targeted and is active when I'm doing that exercise. So it's not just a lower body exercise. You can almost think of it as a full body posterior or back exercise. Okay, quads and glutes. So again, lower body. So quadriceps, like your legs, and glutes, the buttocks, squat and lunge, we target those. For the upper body, for specifically back and biceps, we have the pull and the row. And for the upper body again, so the pull and the row targets the back. So, but then again, we also want to target the front, which would then be the chest, shoulders, and triceps. So we have a push, we have a dip, and we have a press. hence the 8 exercises. Now, let me just point out here that to keep this quite simple, think of it this way. You can essentially pick things up. Let's start with the lower body. So posterior chain, when I lift things, if I lift things off the floor, my entire back, upper and lower body, so the back of my legs, my lower back and my upper back is being targeted and is working there. If I'm doing a squat and a lunge, imagine I'm pushing away from the floor, like when I'm squatting, either wouldn't be using barbell, but let's say either as the wall ball squat, which you'll see what that looks like, or let's say the leg press, I'm pushing away from myself, so that involves my legs and my buttocks, okay? Now for a pull in a row, you can pull in really fundamentally 2 directions. You can pull in a horizontal plane, works the back, and you can pull in a vertical plane, also works the back. It's quite simple. So you can pull down, working the back, and you can pull towards yourself in a horizontal plane. So 2 planes, 2 pulling movements, target the same muscle groups, but as a different exercise. Okay. Same with the upper body. So you can push, and you can press, and you can dip. So these are like 3 directions in which we can push. So push horizontal, okay, push vertical, and push vertical but in the opposite direction than I would with a shoulder press, let's say, like a dip. Now they all work the same muscle groups, except for the shoulder press, the emphasis is mostly on the shoulders, but my chest is still involved like with the other exercises. So keep that in mind, that you want to have a very good understanding of these movements, so you know when to, let's say, alternate the different exercises to target the same muscle group. So don't get stuck on the exercises. Focus on what muscle group am I targeting here. Okay. So let me show you some images of what they look like. So this would be, okay, so I'm going to show you now an exercise for posterior chain here, going through machine, a body weight, and a free weight for each. So you can kind of see what that looks like. And then as we build this program together, you'll see that you will have a certain, let's say, preference for certain movements, and you won't necessarily be just body weight or just machines or just free weights. Usually, it will be a combination of them because, and we'll get to that in a later slide. But it's important to understand that there's no such thing really as a gym workout and machine workout, like a home workout with just free weights and body weight. It's really a bit of a mix because certain types of equipment lend themselves better to for that particular exercise. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So here you go. So here we've got a posterior chain like a deadlift with a machine. Here's a body weight, and then here's the dumbbell version. Then we have the squat, again targeting the quads and the glutes. And so this would be machine, body weight, and the dumbbell. So dumbbell and body weight would be very similar. The only difference is that you would use a dumbbell here. For lunge, and again, sometimes you would alternate a squat for lunge, right? You wouldn't do them in the same workout necessarily, okay? But you could, but I'll show you what I mean. So you could do a single leg press. It's the same movement pattern as a lunge or a split squat. Okay, machine, body weight, and dumbbell. For pull-up, again targeting the back and the biceps, we have the machine, we have body weight, and we have weighted. Again, you can also think of these as, remember I told you that you won't necessarily just do machine, body weight, or weighted. It really depends on what level you're at. So if you're at home and all you have and you're a really strong guy, then machine would be optimal because you can go really, really heavy no matter how strong you are. But if you don't have a machine and you're quite strong, then again, a weighted pull-up would be the best option. For the row, again, same thing. We're now just doing the horizontal pull. Whenever you're pulling, you're working the back. Whenever you're pushing away, you're working the front. Okay, so we have the machine for the row, we have body weight row, and then we have a weighted row. We have the chest and triceps for a pushing movement, particularly the chest press. For the machine, we have a push-up or we have a weighted bench press. Okay, for the dip, you can either do body weight dip, you can do weighted dip. Now, please remember, this is not the most comprehensive or the most exhaustive list of possible ways to do these things, but this is going to give you an idea. But even though there are like 1,000 like variations that you could do, and there's like, you know, thousands more alternatives for each exercise, you'll find that certain exercises or certain apparatuses like the rings, or let's say a certain machine, is just really perfect for a particular type of exercise. So for example, for me, I really prefer using, when it comes to targeting my legs, I really prefer a machine, right? So it's not necessarily like, let's say for example, if you're doing a lat pull down, like must you have it? No, I can actually get a very good response doing it, let's say a pull-up, same movement, right? So remember, I'm just doing a vertical pull, so whether it's a lat pull down or pull-up, it's the same. But I just feel like certain machines or certain apparatuses give me the best response, and so you basically will start to become sensitive to that, and you select the type of equipment you'll match the type of equipment with the right exercise that gives you the best response, and usually it's a mix. Okay, so for the shoulder press, we have the machine, we have a body weight. This is a pike push-up. Not very popular. Again, this is mostly suitable for intermediate or advanced practitioners. I don't like beginners starting with this. And then you have the weighted shoulder press. This probably is a bit more appropriate for if you're starting, but this gives you an idea. Okay, let's move on to the beta exercises. Now remember, beta exercises are optional, and they form part of your beta routines. So those are the alpha exercises. They form part of your alpha routines. Now we go through the beta exercises, and you guessed it, they make up your beta routines. Okay, so we've got, again, lower body, upper body, upper body. So for lower body, we are going to target the buttocks, the glutes, with a hip thrust, and then we're going to target the calves. And for upper body, we're going to target, and really if you think of upper body here, think of your core. Now I'm so glad I said your core, because when people think of core, they usually associate just the abdominals, but think about your core really as the entire midsection of a person's torso. So it's your core is your abdominals, it's the obliques on the sides, and it's the pelvic floor from the bottom. So almost think of it as a cube, right? So imagine you had a cube as a stomach, and so the front of the cube is the abdominals, the back of the cube is your erector spinae or lower back muscles. You've got the obliques on the side, and at the bottom of the cube, you've got your obliques. And so that's your core, not just the abdominals. And so we have two exercises that target those, the back extension exercise and leg raises. And then for upper body, we have biceps and we have triceps. And so it's the front of the arm and the back of the arm. Okay, so let's quickly take a look at them. For back extension, so here you have a machine, we have body weight, and we have weighted. Okay, leg raise. Here you can use a captain's chair apparatus, usually available at the gym. A hanging is a little bit more challenging. Again, there are many variations you could do to ensure that you have an exercise that will target this area for you, no matter what level you're at. And then again, this would be, instead of it being weighted, so even though I do say weighted here, I actually mean that sometimes if you should try this. So if you did a leg raise with your knees bent, a way to make it way more difficult to increase the load is to decrease leverage. Remember, increasing load equals decreasing the leverage, or vice versa. And then it makes it a lot harder, and because you're making it a lot heavier. And so though it says weighted here, you could put ankle weights on you for this, but the best next progression for me is usually doing your legs straight and pointing your toes. Okay, bicep curl, I prefer the cable here, but you can also do a body weight bicep curl at home, or you can do dumbbells. Tricep extensions, we have cable, body weight, weighted. This is the tricep kickback. Again, you just anchor this to some kind of a door, and then you can do your extensions, and then again, your cables will be ubiquitous throughout the world in many health clubs and gyms, and so you'll find it everywhere. For the hip thrust, again, this is targeting the glutes and the hamstrings. Okay, so remember, this targets triceps, this targets biceps, if you didn't notice. Okay, hip thrust. There's actually a hip thrust machine. I love this exercise. It's direct resistance, direct stimulation for the buttocks muscles, so the gluteals. And this is a bodyweight version. Not a big fan, but it can work for some people. It really works well, depends on your level. And this would be a weighted version of the same thing. You could also do weighted on the bench. But the reason I chose this image is just to show more versatility. All right, so for going to the calf raise, so for calves, we actually use the same leg press machine to do a calf raise. It's very practical. So for those of you, if you really do have the resources, I really recommend, if you only were to buy one machine in your home gym, it would be a leg press machine. You would use it for 2 exercises, leg press and calf raises. Think of it as like a lifelong insurance policy for really strong, beautiful legs, right? So this is how to think about it. But again, if you don't have the resources, the gym's always available. We have the body weight calf raise, then we have the dumbbell calf raise, as you can see. And now we move on to our gamma exercises. Now remember, what does gamma mean? Okay, so these are a tertiary, meaning they're not primary and they're not secondary. So they're not that important, but they are important when, let's say, you really have a deficiency that a large or medium muscle group exercise will not correct for, right? And so gamma exercises become important. So again, let's look at each of these exercises and the muscle groups that they target. So, now let's quickly address the word complex. What does complex mean? So complex means a set of exercises, right? So it doesn't mean one exercise like with the alpha and gamma, with the beta, but with a complex can mean sometimes 2 or more exercises targeting a specific area that you'll do in one go. Now, gamma exercises and gamma routines are usually an exception to how we would, let's say, execute our traditional 10x set of 12 reps, 60 seconds. Here we don't time, we don't really care too much. We still have the same cadence, right? We have a slow negative, we have a 1 second positive, we have even a pause where we need to. But the focus here is not moving. It's a little bit different to the beta and the alpha routines. And when we get to the routines, you'll see what I'm saying. But remember, complex means 2 or more exercises that targets a specific muscle group. So again, we have hips, lower body, upper body, core. Remember core? Core is that, that 4-dimensional or 3-dimensional cube that I was talking about, where you have your abdominals, you have your lower back muscles, you have your pelvic floor, and you've got your obliques. Shoulders, we've got the scapular complex, we have the neck complex. Again, so imagine if you're going to do your neck your neck can move in 4 ways, and so you'll actually stimulate it in at least 3 ways, but you could stimulate it in 4 ways to really work the entire neck muscles, and then forearms as well. And again, forearms, it's not just, a unidirectional, you can actually do eversion and inversion of the wrists. Okay, so let me quickly show you. You actually do get machines just designed for neck exercises, and if you are going to use them, make sure it's a brand like Medex or Nautilus machines. These machines were engineered to really track along proper muscle and joint function such that you can really trust that they won't hurt you. So machine neck exercises, I use this at home, the back neck extension machine, and then I can literally, through manual resistance, I can stimulate the sides of my neck muscles to target them. For shoulder, imagine, when you're shrugging, you've seen people actually shrug. So you're not just training your traps, but you should think of it as a supportive exercise for mobilizing your scapula while targeting the trapezius muscles. And so you have then the opposite, which is a depression, and then we have a retraction and a protraction. So again, 4 exercises just to target the shoulder complex. Thoracic complex, now pay attention here. So now, just like a leg raise and a lower back exercise will target, let's say, the lower back, and let's say a leg raise will target the lower abdominals. So the thoracic complex also targets the core, but it's the top. So when you're doing a crunch, you're actually working the top, let's say, quadrant or half of your abdominals. Whereas when you're doing leg raise, you're working the bottom half of the abdominals. Make sense? So the thoracic complex is where you get to really learn to mobilize the thoracic spine, which is basically the spine that run along your rib cage. And moving along the rib cage, back and forth, this would be flexion, so thoracic flexion, and this would be thoracic extension without moving your lower body. And so you're learning to utilize and work these muscles. And I love these exercises. They are really good at getting in on the, let's say, learning how to mobilize your thoracic complex and also get at certain weaknesses in your core. For wrist complex, as you can see, this would be a simple curl, and you can actually have neutral raises, which works, again, different sides. So you can actually work the back. Remember, wrist exercise works the forearms. So you can imagine if you're lifting, if you've got a weight that is, its weight is displaced in front of you, if you're lifting it, it's going to work the front side of the forearms. So, these gamma exercises are pretty cool. I mean, they really target very specific areas. And so you would get to raise it neutrally this way, so it would target the side of the forearm and the opposite side. And then again, an wrist extension would focus on the extensors of the forearms, and then a wrist flexion would focus on the forearm flexors. And my favorite is a wrist roller because it does both at the same time, a flexion and extension at the same time. So what I like about these, you can have a wrist roller lying around, and you can just basically, whenever you see it, pick it up and do a set whenever you like, but you can also do it part as your gamma routine. Okay, hip complex, very important. So as you can see here, you can do the adductor and abductor machine. Many machines are actually, well, not many, I should say. The Medex or the Nautilus machines, they are two machines in one. So you can work your adductors and abductors in one exercise, which I really like. Again, if you don't have machines, the way you can do this is by working the adductors by squeezing a ball, and you do an isometric hold. So you squeeze for 20 seconds at 50% capacity, and then a little bit harder at 75% capacity, and then as hard as you can, roughly 95 to 100% capacity for the last 20 seconds. And then here you would be doing, working your abductors and just doing the same cadence as the traditional 10x cadence. Here you'd be doing, let's say, a bodyweight extension, where you'd be lifting up your legs, keeping your upper body still, which is very, very difficult to do. And so again, here you have 1, 2, 3 different exercises targeting the hip. Now, hip exercises are quite important. People always scoff at these, but nowadays, so many of us are not only deficient in terms of our bone mineral density, but even if you weren't, let's say your total bone mineral density was in a healthy range, even an optimal range, that doesn't mean that your hips are in optimal condition, because then the neck of the femur, of the hip bone, is usually the one that's most susceptible to fracture, and that's really what you want to monitor throughout your life, right? You want to make sure that you have the requisite density in the neck of the femur throughout your life. And so these exercises are the only way you can get at strengthening the hip muscles, but also through strengthening the hip muscles, transfer force through the muscles to the tendon, to the bone, to stimulate osteogenic adaptive responses, bone growth. Now, of course, other exercises are also quite good at doing this, like heavy loading with barbells. Again, people always think I'm against barbells, but there's actually a place for where you want to train with barbells, and it's in a very different context, but it has great utility for really overloading the skeleton in ways that even 10x can't. So keep that in mind. But these gamma exercises help you target those.